Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a blister, a bent spear, and a drumbeat in the distance that makes your stomach do something unnatural. You've been conscripted, again, though no one remembers when the first time was. You're standing in a muddy field next to a man who's using his helmet as a soup bowl and calling it tactical. The sword you were handed is older than sin and twice as rusty, and someone just yelled, "Formation," like that means anything to people who don't know their left from a goat. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up wrong. Not just on the wrong side of the blanket, but as if gravity itself has chosen spite as a personal vendetta. The ground is damp. The air smells like boiled turnips and indecision. Your mouth tastes like someone else's dream. And you're not entirely sure where your left sock went, but it's definitely somewhere colder than here. You try to sit up and immediately regret remembering you have a spine. It clicks like a door hinge in protest. Across the camp, a man is screaming, "To arms!" at full volume. He's pointing at a squirrel. The squirrel looks unbothered. The squirrel might be winning. You blink against the rising sun, which is doing its best impression of a judgmental parent, shining directly into your eyes with the full power of, "I told you so." A crow caws, or laughs. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. You reach for your boots. They are not where you left them. In their place is a half-eaten onion and something that might once have been a rabbit. The rabbit is gone, but it left behind a message in the form of a suspiciously chewed strap and a pile of judgment. You find one boot under a sleeping man named Doric, who may or may not be dead. He isn't. He just breathes very slowly and claims it's a form of prayer. You believe him because it's too early to argue. The other boot is hanging from a tree. How it got there is a mystery, but a fresh one, the kind that suggests someone in camp is either very tall or very motivated. You retrieve it with a stick and an ill-advised hop that results in a twisted knee and a curse you're fairly certain is illegal to say before sunrise. The boot is soggy. So is your soul. As you try to lace them, a man with a pot on his head walks by. He nods solemnly and says, "The stew spoke to me." You nod back. This feels like a conversation you don't want to be part of. Behind him, someone is throwing dried peas at a sleeping pig and calling it strategy. The camp itself is the aftermath of something no one agreed to. Tents sag in defeat. Smoke limps out of a broken pot. A banner hangs from a spear, half unraveled and upside down, which feels metaphorically correct. Somewhere, someone is practicing trumpet calls. He is not good at it. The trumpet sounds like it's apologizing. You wander toward what passes for breakfast. It's being stirred by a man with no eyebrows and a scar shaped like a badger. He grunts at you and gestures to a pot so thick and gray it could be mistaken for wet cement. You take a scoop. It tastes like oats, regret, and faint lies. The man nods as if you've passed a test. You're not sure you want to know what the test was. Big day, someone mutters nearby, mouth full of what may or may not be bread. Commander says we march at second bell. You both look toward the sun. It's low, lazy, and entirely unbothered by your plans. The bell has not rung. It hasn't been rung in 3 days because the bell ringer sprained his ankle during an enthusiastic interpretive dance that he insisted was part of a blessing ritual. No one believed him, but no one had the heart to stop him either. The man who screamed earlier is now standing on a barrel, shirtless, waving a flag made out of someone's trousers. "This is the day," he shouts, voice cracking like old parchment. "The day of glory." A nearby soldier, picking something unmentionable from his ear, mutters, "Didn't we have one of those last week?" No one answers. The barrel man falls off. No one helps him up. You check your pack. It contains 3 hard biscuits, 1 bent spoon, and a note from your mother telling you not to forget to wash your feet. You haven't. You remember your feet often. You just haven't seen clean water since the last village, which may or may not have been a dream. A rooster crows somewhere nearby. There are no chickens in this camp. Someone has brought a rooster purely for ambiance. It glares at you from atop a helmet, as if personally offended by your posture. You finish your gray mush. It doesn't finish you back, which is considered a win. As you rise, sword strapped at an awkward angle, and one sock slightly wetter than the other, you hear the shout again. To arms! This time, it might be serious. Or someone just saw another squirrel. It really is hard to tell. Either way, the day has begun, and you are in it. Wrong foot first. You eat something that might be oats and might be gravel. It's gray, for one. Not a hopeful gray, like the mist on a cool morning. No, this is the gray of lost decisions and kitchen fires that ended marriages. It sticks to the spoon like it resents you, and you suspect it would stick to walls too, if thrown with feeling. You chew carefully, slowly, like someone trying to solve a riddle that might break a tooth. Across the fire, your comrade Rolf is already on his second bowl. He eats with the enthusiasm of a man who has long since given up asking questions. "It's good for morale," he says through a mouthful, spraying a few damp clumps back into the pot for emphasis. You don't ask whose morale. Yours is clearly holding out for something better. The pot sits in the center of your sorry little camp circle, bubbling occasionally as if trying to protest its own existence. It was stirred earlier by a man with 1 eyebrow and 0 culinary instincts, using a stick that may once have been part of a broom. There were no spices. There was no salt. There was a root of something, possibly turnip, possibly not, that dissolved on contact like it feared commitment. Rolf leans over conspiratorially. "Secrets in the chew," he says, tapping his temple. You stare at him, then down at your spoon. You've been chewing. If you chewed more, your jaw might revolt. Someone coughs behind you, a deep wet sound that says either sickness or someone tried to swallow the wrong end of a spoon again. Could be either. You don't look. The fire hisses at a drip of moisture from a nearby overhang. The pot hisses back. Breakfast is communal, which is a generous word for it. Men crouch in awkward half circles, shielding their bowls like prisoners guarding their last ration. One soldier is eating with a fork, which is somehow worse. Another has taken to dipping dry bread into the mix, using it like a sponge. The bread dissolves instantly. He eats it anyway and nods, like that was the plan all along. There is a moment, brief but real, where the steam rises just right and the fire crackles and someone hums a tune with no words. It could almost be comforting. You take a bite. A rock clicks against your molar. You wince. The moment is gone. Rolf keeps eating. "Used to be worse," he says, licking his spoon. "Back at Weathermere, they made breakfast out of boiled moss and horse water." You nod slowly, unsure whether Weathermere is a place or a hallucination. The way he tells it, all his best memories taste like mildew and bad decisions. You glance at the others. One man is asleep with his bowl still in his lap. Another is stirring his porridge with the handle of a dagger and muttering something that sounds like an apology to his stomach. At the edge of the camp, someone has started dry heaving into a bush. No one offers help. That bush knows what it did. Your spoon bends slightly when you try to dig deeper. It doesn't break. It just gives up, like it's tired of this too. You try to flatten it against your knee and only manage to spill half the bowl onto your sleeve. Rolf chuckles and offers you his crust of bread. You decline. You've seen where he stores it somewhere between his armpit and his ambitions. A messenger rides past, mud flying from the hooves of a miserable-looking horse. He shouts something about orders and dawn patrols and probably glory, but he's gone before anyone cares enough to answer. Someone behind you mumbles, "Good." Hope he chokes on his own trumpet, and is immediately shushed by a man with a ladle and absolutely no authority. You finally finish the bowl. It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like surrender. Your stomach makes a sound like someone moving furniture in the next room. Rolf pats your shoulder. "Sticks to the ribs," he says proudly. You nod. It also sticks to your fingers, your teeth, and possibly your soul. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows. Still not yours. Still no one knows who brought it. It's perched on top of a bundle of spears and looks more awake than anyone deserves to be. You stand up slowly, wiping your hands on your tunic, which is only slightly cleaner than the ground. Your knees crack. Your back pops. Rolf stretches beside you and farts without apology. "Ready for the day?" he asks. You stare at the empty bowl, then at the pot, which bubbles ominously as if daring you to come back for seconds. No. But you go anyway. The commander climbs atop a rock that may have once been part of a wall or a cow, depending on who you ask. His cape is billowing impressively, though that might be the wind's attempt to remove it from this situation entirely. His helmet gleams in a way that suggests someone else polished it, probably under duress, and he squints into the morning haze with the expression of a man who has never personally held a shovel but frequently gives speeches about them. You are assembled, more or less. Rows are loosely formed in the sense that some people are facing forward, others sideways, and at least one man is still asleep on his feet. A chicken clucks nearby with great concern. It might outrank half of you. The commander raises a hand. Someone coughs. Someone else burps what smells suspiciously like uncooked barley. Silence falls slowly and reluctantly, like a drunk climbing off a wagon. "Men!" the commander begins, pausing dramatically, possibly to remember what comes after that. And "Men," he says again, "just to be sure. Today is a day of destiny." The word rings out over the camp like a thrown ladle. Several people blink. One claps prematurely. A bird flies overhead, unimpressed. The commander gestures with his sword, which gleams slightly less than his ego. "We stand at the turning point of history. Our children's children will sing of this day." He pauses, assuming we have children. This gets a nervous laugh from one corner and a visible flinch from a man who is probably still recovering from the last turning point. Rolf leans over and whispers, "Didn't he say that before we crossed the river?" You nod. He also said it before the pig cart incident, the lost map incident, and that time the stew turned green. The commander paces now, back and forth atop his rock like a preacher trying to remember if he believes what he's saying. "The enemy thinks we are weak," he cries, "that we are disorganized, that we are soft." There is a small, awkward silence as everyone briefly reflects on how accurate that assessment might be. "But we have heart," he says, thumping his chest with a fist that nearly causes him to topple off the rock. "And we have spirit," and he checks a scroll, which he unfolds upside down, squints, then flips. "We have tactical initiative." You are unsure what that means, but it sounds expensive. A few men cheer. One throws a piece of bread, which the wind carries into someone's eye. The commander flourishes his sword. It almost slips from his grip, but he catches it with the kind of grace that suggests this is not the first time. "This is not just a battle," he continues, with all the weight of a man reading a menu out loud. "It is the battle that will define our lives. The day we rise from the mud and carve our names into the bones of legend." You glance at your boots. The mud seems determined to keep you exactly where you are. One man near the front is mouthing the words along with him. Either he's memorized the speech or he's prophesying under his breath again. And when the sun sets tonight, the commander booms, "It will set on heroes." There is an awkward beat where everyone wonders if that means you're expected to die. He moves on before anyone can ask. "We are the storm," he bellows. "We are the hammer." Someone to your left mutters, "We are so very tired." You cough loudly to cover it. The commander throws both arms wide, nearly clocking his squire with the sword. "For honor," he shouts. "For glory, for the banner of house," he trails off, squinting at the fluttering fabric, which is currently tangled around a tent post. Red whistle, he decides, which may or may not be accurate. The tent groans in protest, and then, at last, the speech ends, not with a bang, but with an awkward throat clear and a slow descent from the rock, during which he steps on his own cloak and has to pretend it was deliberate. You clap. Everyone claps. Some with the reluctant rhythm of people not entirely sure what just happened, but you clap. Because he has a sword. Because he believes, loudly. Because speeches, like breakfast, are not about taste, they're about survival. And because, somehow, this is supposed to help. You're assigned to the third line, or maybe the fifth. There was definitely a number shouted in your direction, but it got swallowed by the wind, and possibly the man currently retching into a bush beside you. He's not sick, just dramatic, and entirely convinced that wearing a helmet makes his thoughts echo. You're inclined to agree, if only to keep him from sharing more. The ground under your feet is the kind of sticky that promises to keep souvenirs. Mud, trampled grass, something that might be a piece of sausage. It all squelches together into a texture that suggests the gods have stepped away from the wheel for a bit. You try not to think about what's seeping into your boots. They were once waterproof. Now they're just wet. A trumpet sounds. It's not a good trumpet. It sounds like someone squeezing a goose mid-sneeze. Still, it means something, because the men in the front start shifting into lines, or what they insist are lines. Mostly it's a jagged, hopeful suggestion of geometry, like someone halfway through remembering how to draw a square. You join your section, or what appears to be your section, next to a man named Thordrick, who has a bandage wrapped around his head and an open wound where his optimism used to be. He looks at you with the dull, sideways glance of someone who's already accepted that today will be dumb in new and exciting ways. Third line, yeah? He asks. Maybe fifth. You say. He nods. Doesn't matter. They usually aim for the front. A man in polished armor rides by on a horse that looks like it's regretting everything. The man shouts, "Tighten ranks," and waves a stick with a tassel on it. No one tightens anything. The man disappears into the fog ahead, having contributed nothing except volume. Someone further back starts singing. It's a marching song, or maybe a funeral hymn, either way. It's off-key and alarmingly fast. You all try to join in, but no one remembers the second verse, and it crumbles into mumbling. It doesn't matter. Morale is high, or at least awake. The banners flap. One of them tears. A squire tries to fix it, but ends up stabbing himself with the pole. He walks off, whimpering, trailing fabric and shame. To your left, a group of archers are arguing over whether crosswind counts as divine intervention. To your right, a man is taping a playing card to his helmet, for luck. It's the Queen of Turnips, from a deck someone made when they were drunk and lonely. Then the shouting starts. Not war cries, just regular shouting. Someone's out of place. Someone else thinks they're not. An argument breaks out about what direction north is, and two lines begin rotating like mismatched gears in a broken clock. A general with impressive feathers yells something about discipline and formation integrity. The soldiers nearest to him nod vigorously, then promptly wander off in opposite directions. You stand very still and hope no one asks you to explain your own position. A drummer begins tapping out a rhythm. You suspect it's supposed to help with marching, but it sounds suspiciously like the start of a drinking jig. Someone nearby begins clapping along. Someone else joins in with spoons. It very briefly turns into a hoedown. Eventually, a horn blows long and flat, like a yawn from a bored god, and everyone freezes. Or rather, everyone mostly stops moving. A few men are still arguing about which line they belong to. One is entirely asleep, balanced impressively against his pike like a tragic scarecrow. And yet, somehow, this is an army. This is your army. Loose ranks, confused shouting, unpredictable smells. No one's quite where they should be, and yet the whole mass teeters forward as one, like a drunk trying to bluff his way through a ballroom dance. You grip your spear. The wood is slick with someone else's sweat. The shield on your arm feels heavier than you remember. Ahead, the mist parts just enough to show the vague suggestion of another army cleaner, straighter, far more terrifying. Your commander bellows something unintelligible and dramatic. It might be a charge order, it might be a poem. Either way, the men cheer, and somehow, impossibly, you begin to march. Formation be damned. You're not a line, you're a suggestion, a rumor with weapons, and that, apparently, is enough. You walk and walk. Then you walk some more. The landscape changes not at all, except in how many blisters it seems designed to cultivate. It's a masterwork of discomfort. Each footstep squishes into the kind of mud that steals parts of your soul through your soles. And there's always one rock that finds your heel, like it's settling an old score. The column moves like a half-dead centipede, sluggish and wheezing. Every few minutes someone stumbles, curses, adjusts a strap, or quietly reevaluates the decisions that led them here. You watch a man tie his boot so tight he cuts off circulation, then nods like he's done something wise. Another removes a pebble from his sock, only to find two more waiting beneath. The road is long, the sky is gray, and the optimism died somewhere back near the river crossing, likely drowned under a misplaced wagon wheel. Your pack shifts again. It's not heavy so much as malicious, somehow, always tugging just enough to remind you it's there. The straps dig into your shoulders like the hands of a disappointed ghost, and the contents rattle with the sound of exactly one spoon you've been too afraid to lose. Your helmet presses against your forehead like it's trying to merge with your skull. Someone starts singing. It begins in the middle of the column, too far ahead to stop, too close to ignore. The tune is upbeat, but the lyrics are not. Something about a goat, a failed harvest, and a cousin who married into the wrong village. It rhymes, but only just. A few voices join in, then a few more, until the whole line is filled with off-key misery masked as music. You do not sing. You march with the song buzzing in your ears, each verse somehow worse than the last. There's a part about toe rot, another about lice. A man beside you improvises a stanza about the stew from 2 nights ago that makes a veteran cry. The rhythm, however, begins to do something. It doesn't make you happy, but it makes your misery more efficient. Step, 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 sigh, step, step, curse, step. It gives the pain a pattern, and that pattern becomes a habit, and the habit becomes something like progress. Behind you, Rolf sings louder than the rest. His voice is part gravel, part confidence, and wholly incorrect. He seems delighted anyway. If we die, at least they'll hear us coming, he says between verses, as if that's a comfort. You nod slowly, contemplating the logistics of silence-based survival, and conclude that such luxury is for armies with better shoes. Someone throws up quietly into a ditch and keeps walking. No one reacts. The ditch understands. It accepts all. Ahead, a boy no older than 15 stumbles and goes down. 2 others help him up without a word. His helmet is too big and keeps slipping sideways, and his sword has been dragging in the dirt for the past mile. He looks like he's cosplaying bravery, and no one has the heart to tell him otherwise. You pass a rock that looks like a face, and then a bush that looks like the same face, and begin to suspect you're either hallucinating or the terrain is mocking you. The sun tries to come out but gives up halfway, settling for a smear of brightness behind clouds that smell faintly of damp, wool, and defeat. A breeze rolls in. It's not refreshing. It smells like the back of the supply wagon, where something is either fermenting or dying, and possibly both. Your feet begin to feel like they've always been moving, like you were born mid-step and will die mid-step, and this entire life is just a particularly grueling leg of someone else's errand. You wonder if war was always like this, more blisters than glory, more mud than meaning. You keep walking, Someone ahead trips. A man to your left sits down mid-march and simply refuses to rise again. He's not injured, just profoundly finished with the concept of forward. The officer glares at him but doesn't argue. He'll catch up, or he won't. The column moves on. Evening starts to bloom in the corners of the sky, and you realize you've covered perhaps a league, maybe two. It feels like a continent. The singing has devolved into humming, and the humming into grunts. The goat in the song has apparently died 3 separate times, and the stew now features prominently in the chorus. You still do not sing, but you march, because stopping hurts more now, because the man behind you would trip, because the next village has bread, maybe, and fewer flies, because sometimes momentum is all that's left. Step, step, hate, step. You finally see them. They're just standing there. Across a field that looks like it gave up on being a field weeks ago and now mostly identifies as a bog with commitment issues. Mud stretches between your two armies like the world's saddest dance floor. The air smells like trampled onions and horse decisions, and even the birds have decided not to participate. You squint through the haze, eyes watering from the smoke of a nearby cook fire that is absolutely not under control. And there they are, the enemy. They look tired. One is picking something out of his teeth with a dagger. Another is sitting on a rock, staring into the middle distance like it owes him money. A third adjusts his helmet, gives up, and tosses it aside altogether. There's a banner, but it's limp and crooked, hanging from a pole that appears to be held together with chewing gum and misplaced faith. And then one of them waves. Not the slow, ominous kind of wave that screams, "Prepare to die," but the casual, lazy kind that says, "Hey, I think we met once at a wedding." You wave back. You don't mean to. It just happens. Muscle memory from peacetime. A few heads on your side turn to look at you, but no one comments. Someone near the front nods like it was the right call. The line shifts around you. Boots scrape in the mud. Swords clink against armor that's more rust than metal. A man behind you asks if anyone remembers the signal for retreat. Someone else asks what the signal for lunch is. No one answers either question. You all stare ahead, waiting for something definitive to happen, like a trumpet call or an act of God. The enemy makes no move. They're just standing there. Some are leaning. A few are sitting. One is arguing with what appears to be a goat. The goat seems unimpressed. There's no shouting, no charging, no speechifying, just a general sense of reluctant attendance, like both sides showed up to a duel and immediately wished they hadn't. Rolf appears beside you, chewing on something that might be a beet or a very unfortunate apple. He squints across the field. "They don't look ready," he says, "or angry. Maybe they're waiting for backup. Maybe we are." He chews thoughtfully, then spits into the mud with the ceremony of a man making a statement. You nod. It feels appropriate. Neither of you moves. Your commander rides to the front and raises a sword. It gleams dramatically for a moment, then the horse sneezes and nearly unseats him. He shouts something inspirational, probably, but the wind catches it and transforms it into a sound that could easily be pasta. The men give a weak cheer. One starts clapping, realizes no one else is, and awkwardly turns it into a stretch. Across the way, the waving man sits down. You watch as a small knot of enemy soldiers start rearranging their line, but it's less like a tactical maneuver and more like someone organizing chairs at a family reunion. A few of them wander away entirely, maybe to find shade, maybe just to be elsewhere. Someone on your side mutters, "Should we do something?" Another says, "They look like they already lost." A third suggests charging, but is ignored immediately and aggressively. You shift your grip on your spear. It's heavier than you want it to be and doesn't sit right in your hand today. Maybe it's the humidity. Maybe it's the growing suspicion that neither side really wants this to happen. The goat from the enemy camp trots halfway across the field and stops dead center. It stares at your army, then back at theirs. Slowly, it sits. A peace delegate maybe, a symbol of shared exhaustion. No one shoots it. You inhale deeply. The air is warm and thick and carries the scent of soup and wet wool. You hear a cough, a burp, a small prayer. None of them come from the same person. You look back at the enemy. One of them raises a mug, toasts you, casually, then drinks. It's not war, not yet. It's something in between, something confused, something that's waiting for someone else to make the first loud mistake. And until then, you stand, together, apart. Two tired armies beneath a disappointed sky. You're still tying your boot when it happens. The laces are muddy and frayed and probably cursed, and you're halfway through a loop when the man beside you lets out a sound that starts as a scream, detours through a sneeze, and ends in a sort of wet, wordless sigh. Then he drops like a sack of wet grain. You don't check for a pulse. No one ever drops that gracefully unless they're very dead or very dramatic. And either way, he's not getting up before lunch. You blink, still bent over. Your boot. The knot isn't done. Your fingers hover above it, like finishing the loop might fix this somehow. Around you, nothing moves for a second. Then everything does, all at once, in all the wrong directions. There's no grand war horn, no booming voice yelling loose from the enemy side. Just a single arrow, humming through the air like a drunk bee with a grudge. Then another, then a few dozen more, falling from the sky like the world has developed a skin condition. Someone shouts, "Incoming," as though the arrows weren't already enthusiastically demonstrating that. You duck too late. Something thunks into the dirt behind you with a casual finality that makes your spine reconsider its current job. You flop sideways into a half-run, half-crawl that lands you behind a man using his shield as more of a philosophical concept than an actual barrier. He's trembling and mumbling a prayer that mixes 5 different religions and a recipe for soup. The arrows keep coming, not in a tidy wave, but in a scattered panic, like someone up there found the wrong lever and refuses to admit it. Most hit the ground. A few hit armor. One takes a helmet clean off a man's head and sends it flying into the bushes, where it will later be mistaken for a wild animal by a very frightened scout. You try to count how many are falling, but numbers stop making sense after 5. Or maybe you're just too busy trying not to be one of them. A voice screams, "Shields up!" A dozen people obey. A few interpret it as run screaming into the woods. One very large man just lies down completely flat and begins snoring, either from terror or a very specific coping mechanism. The guy to your left catches one in the shoulder. He looks more annoyed than anything else, like the arrow interrupted a thought he was enjoying. He snaps it off, mutters something about bad craftsmanship, and continues adjusting his helmet. Rolf appears beside you, breathless, shield dented, face lit up, like it's finally a real party. "Told you it'd start without warning," he says, grinning. You're not sure he's ever actually told you that, but now's not the time to argue. You nod, mostly because your teeth are clenched, too tight to speak. The air is loud now, screams, clanks, the soft hiss of arrows finding things they shouldn't. It smells like fear and oil and someone's breakfast that didn't survive the shock. You raise your shield late, but it's just in time to catch a splintered shaft with enough force to rattle your elbow. You curse and adjust your grip, which doesn't help but feels productive. Eventually, the arrows stop. Not because they ran out of targets, just because someone's counting coin on the other side and deciding whether it's worth launching more. There's a brief silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded, the panicked rustling of a man trying to bury himself in loose dirt, and the unsettling creak of the banner behind you trying to fall down again. You look around. The guy who screamed, sneezed, and maybe died is still down. Someone's trying to drag him away, but his armor's caught on a root, and they're arguing about whether to cut him out or just wait and see if he gets up on his own. A medic wanders past with a look that says he's neither qualified nor interested. You finish tying your boot. Finally, the knot holds. You stand, The next volley is probably coming. You don't know when or where from, or if it will have better aim this time. But your armor's on. Your shield's up. Your legs are shaking and your stomach is considering escape. But you're still breathing, which, for now, is enough. The horn blows like it means something, like it's a call to glory, or vengeance, or at least synchronized movement. But mostly it just startles a nearby horse into kicking over the stew pot and trampling someone's helmet. Everyone stares, blinking like they've been caught mid-nap, which many of caught, but them have. No one moves, at least not at first. The horn lingers in the air, too long and slightly off-key, like the blower forgot when to stop and just committed. It wobbles into silence with the grace of a collapsing chair. Then, as if the spell is broken, everything starts happening at once. A man shouts something that might be charge, or possibly charred. He's from a farming village and tends to confuse combat with vegetables under pressure. Either way, he takes off running, sword raised, expression heroic in a way that demands someone paint it later. No one follows him. He stops halfway, looks back, and pretends he was just stretching. A few people nod supportively. Then someone else takes the initiative by tripping over a tent stake and accidentally hurling a spear that narrowly misses your head and buries itself in a log. With such dramatic finality, you assume the log must have done something wrong. That's apparently enough to count as momentum, because half the line starts moving forward, awkwardly, and without any apparent coordination. Like a group of cousins learning to square dance for the first time. Someone throws a chicken. You don't know who. You don't know why. But it sails through the air with a flap of indignant wings and a shriek that echoes across the battlefield like an opera singer mid-breakdown. It lands somewhere near the front with a soft, betrayed squawk and immediately runs in the opposite direction of everything else. You admire its clarity. You look around. Formations have dissolved into enthusiastic suggestions. The man to your left has put his helmet on backwards but is too proud to adjust it. The one to your right is still lacing up his greaves and shouting, "Wait, wait, wait." Like war is something you can pause. A drummer starts drumming, badly, and then stops when no one seems impressed. Rolf appears beside you again, somehow out of breath without having moved. He's gripping his axe like it personally insulted him. "That horn," he wheezes, "always makes me think of my mother-in-law." You don't ask. Ahead, someone actually makes it to the enemy's outer skirmish line and stops just short of contact, as if unsure what to do next. He waves. One of the enemy waves back. A third man, possibly unsure of what just occurred, gently bumps into both and mutters an apology. You watch as this confusion radiates outward, turning what should be a clash of steel into something closer to an awkward reunion at a very confusing family picnic. The horn blows again, higher this time, as if trying to correct itself. It doesn't help. A flock of crows takes off from a nearby tree, possibly to find a battlefield with more consistent tone and fewer poultry projectiles. You tighten your grip on your shield. Your foot is sinking into mud, your nerves are buzzing, and someone behind you has started singing the wrong marching song, loudly. You take a breath. This is, apparently, the moment, the one you've trained for, or drilled for, or at least the one you've listened to people talk about while you pretended to stretch. This is the part where it's supposed to feel noble, or at least cinematic. Instead, it feels like a tavern brawl broke loose and wandered into an open field. You steel yourself anyway, because the enemy's moving now, sort of, in their own confused ripple of action and hesitation. You see two of them bump heads and fall over. One runs in the wrong direction. Another is chasing the chicken. You lift your weapon, not because you believe in the cause, not because the horn told you to, but because at this point, standing still might be the most dangerous thing of all. The horn stops. Silence returns. Then someone screams something that sounds like bananas and charges. And that, apparently, is the real signal. The ground is uneven. You notice this as your foot catches on a rock disguised as mud, and you stumble forward with the grace of a collapsing bookshelf. You don't fall. Exactly, you just keep running at a steeper angle than intended, hoping momentum counts as courage. The man in front of you drops his sword with a clatter that sounds suspiciously like nope in metal. He keeps going anyway, arms pumping wildly like he's forgotten which parts of him are armed and which are decorative. You follow. Not because you want to, not because of honor or strategy or a well-timed horn, but because stopping feels like an admission, and you're not ready for that kind of intimacy with your own choices. So you run. Your armor clanks with every step, a symphony of second-hand metal held together by straps, prayer, and something sticky you found in the supply tent. Your helmet tilts forward, narrowing your vision to a tunnel of grass, legs, and the occasional terrifying glimpse of the enemy, who are either charging or jogging in your general direction while screaming at inanimate objects. The air is thick with noise, steel, breath, the occasional goat scream, possibly the same goat, possibly just tradition now. The guy to your left is yelling something motivational, but it's hard to take him seriously when his helmet is backwards and he's definitely about to run into a bush. The guy to your right is clutching a frying pan instead of a shield, but he looks determined, and honestly, that counts for more today than equipment does. Ahead, the lines blur. You can't tell if the enemy is closer now, or if your eyes have started staging a quiet rebellion. All you know is that the space between you and whatever comes next is shrinking at a rate that feels legally actionable. The man who dropped his sword earlier is now flailing with what might be a tent pole. He screams something about vengeance. It lands flat. Your legs hurt. Your lungs are filing complaints. Your stomach is weighing its options. You keep running. There's a moment to a sliver of pause, a breath caught between the chaos where your foot finds a patch of firm ground. Your armor settles just right, and for one miraculous second, you feel like a warrior. Then you step directly into a puddle the size and temperature of despair and lose all feeling in your right boot. It doesn't matter. The battle is closer now. You can hear the sounds of it, metal meeting metal, people shouting names you hope aren't their own, the occasional deeply personal insult involving someone's mother and a turnip. You reach the edge of it, this chaotic meatball of flailing limbs and bad decisions, and dive in without grace or plan. Your first swing is too wide. It hits someone's shield, might be the enemy's, might be your own. Your second swing connects with something soft that squeals, then runs off, probably not human. Someone grabs your arm, you twist, they let go. You fall into a crouch, more from exhaustion than tactics, and stab upward into what you hope is a thigh and not a fellow conscript's hamstring. The noise is unbearable now. It's not even battle, it's just people who don't want to die shouting at other people who don't want to die, with occasional punctuation from sharp objects. Your ears ring, your eyes blur, your mouth is open and shouting something, though you're not sure if it's a war cry or your grocery list from 2 weeks ago. You don't stop, because stopping now means thinking, and thinking means realizing just how much none of this makes sense, that you charged because everyone else did, that you're swinging a weapon at strangers because a man in a hat said so, that the ground is slick with something, and the man beside you is definitely bleeding from somewhere important, and your next move might be your last if you stop to reconsider it. So you don't. You keep moving. You keep swinging. You keep hoping that the next second makes more sense than the last. And somewhere, deep beneath the mud and noise pretending to be purpose, you almost believe it, might. Your first swing is wide. Not dramatically, cinematically wide, but clumsy, poorly timed, and aimed at a target that has clearly moved on from this interaction. Your sword whooshes through the air, with all the menace of a broom being waved at a stubborn pigeon. You hear yourself make a noise, part grunt, part yelp, part internal apology, and then you stumble forward 2 steps because physics has betrayed you. The man you were aiming for flinches, then slips, then falls backward into a pile of something that might once have been armor or might currently be soup. He goes down hard, limbs tangled, sword lost in a direction that defies basic geography. There's a clatter, a thud, and a very quiet ow. He doesn't get up. You blink. You look at your sword, then at the man, then back at your sword, as if one of them might explain what just happened. Neither does. You hear someone yell, "Nice one!" from behind you. But their tone suggests they're being generous, possibly sarcastic, probably confused. You did not mean to win anything. You're still holding your weapon like it's recently betrayed you. It's heavier than you remember, slightly sticky near the hilt, and vibrating like it's just as surprised as you are. You shift your stance and glance around to see if anyone noticed. Most people are too busy fighting, or yelling, or falling over dramatically while bleeding from non-lethal places. The man at your feet groans, tries to rise, then lays back down with the resigned grace of someone accepting a brief relationship with the earth. You murmur something that sounds like sorry out of sheer social reflex. Then someone swings at you. This one's deliberate, loud, clanging, and extremely personal. You duck, mostly by accident, and feel the rush of air as the blade misses your head by a margin wide enough to qualify as beginner's luck. Your feet tangle again. You half fall, half lunge into the attacker, and your sword still held. Like an awkward party, guest jabs forward and finds a gap in armor that clearly wasn't supposed to be there. The man makes a sound like a broken bell. Then he slumps. Slowly, politely. You're pretty sure you just accidentally did something heroic. You step back, wide-eyed and shaking. There's no cheer, no dramatic music, just mud, breath, noise, and a buzzing in your ears that might be adrenaline or guilt, or both dressed up in the same armor. Your sword is even stickier now. Someone to your left is yelling for help. Someone to your right is dancing in place like his boots are full of ants. A soldier nearby swings a mace in slow circles like he's warming up for something theatrical. No one seems to be winning or losing. It's all just motion, noise, and the occasional burst of someone shouting a name that doesn't belong to anyone here. You stare down at the two men you've defeated, one by accident, one by dumb, stumbling fortune. You wonder if they had names, stories, breakfast. You wonder if this is what victory feels like. Muddy, unsure, slightly nauseous. Your hand hurts. You hadn't noticed before, but your grip is too tight. You try to loosen it. The sword doesn't fall, but it shifts like it's considering a different owner. You move forward, because standing still feels wrong now. The lines have blurred again. There's no formation, just clusters of people in various stages of confusion, exhaustion, and injury. You see a man sitting on a rock, calmly eating bread, while two others duel 3 feet away. The next enemy you face doesn't look particularly interested in fighting. His shoulders sag, his sword is chipped. You lock eyes briefly, and there's a moment shared, awkward, where you both seem to agree this is all a bit much. Then he charges anyway. You swing again. This time, it's not pretty. It's not clean, but it's on purpose, and that might be worse. There is no strategy anymore, just noise, motion, and bread, mud, clings to everything, boots, blades, your dignity. You try to lift your foot, and it makes that awful sound like soup being stepped on. There's a squish, then a slurp, and then the realization that your other foot isn't coming with you. For a terrifying moment, you think this might be how you die. Stuck mid-stride in ankle-deep battlefield stew, while chaos frolics around you like a drunk parade. You wrench your foot free with a heroic squelch, and immediately step on something that is either a helmet or a very unfortunate pie. It crunches. You don't ask questions. Around you, the field has dissolved into a living painting made entirely by artists who strongly disagreed on tone. There's blood, of course, enough to make the grass lose interest in being green. But there's also a surprisingly well-baked bread roll lying peacefully in the dirt, untouched and somehow warm. You stare at it for a second longer than is appropriate for wartime. Your stomach makes a noise like it's negotiating. A scream cuts through the air. Someone is spinning, not in a deadly, whirling dervish way, but just spinning arms out, laughing like he's at a festival that only he was invited to. His sword is gone, his helmet is a bucket, and his eyes are having their own private experience. No one bothers him. You've all silently agreed to let him live in that separate reality where war is interpretive dance. To your right, a man is playing a lute, an actual lute. Where did he get it? Why is he strumming it in the middle of a pitched melee? Why does he sound good? You make eye contact with him as you sidestep a man who just tripped over a fallen banner and is now angrily wrestling the dirt. The lute player nods solemnly. He shifts into a minor chord. Someone behind you starts sobbing, possibly from emotional resonance, possibly from a sword to the leg. The line, if it can still be called that, has broken completely. You're not even sure which side you're on anymore. People are shouting things like, "Hold the left," and "push the center," but the directions are useless. Because left is wherever your feet happen to be, and center is currently occupied by a horse that looks like it has questions. The air smells like iron and onions, and something deeply medicinal. A priest is kneeling in the mud 10 paces away, chanting a prayer that might be to a war god or might just be a recipe. You can't hear him over the lute. It's oddly catchy. A man stumbles past you holding a severed boot, like he's forgotten that it's supposed to have a foot in it. He looks at you, says something about destiny, then falls over and starts snoring immediately. You wonder if you should roll him onto his side. You don't. He seems content. You duck as a helmet flies through the air. It hits a tree with a thud, followed by a shriek from someone who was hiding behind it. You're not sure if they were on your side. You're not sure what your side means anymore. The spinning man is now doing high kicks. Someone cheers. Your sword is sticky, your knees are trembling, and your mouth tastes like copper and regret sandwiches. You try to find someone to fight, but everyone nearby is either already fighting someone else or deeply occupied with their own unraveling sanity. You settle for looking menacing at a bush. The sky rumbles, not from thunder, but from the collective sound of exhausted men and women collectively questioning the choices that led them here. The lute player finishes a song. No one claps, but a nearby corpse twitches approvingly. You stand there, swaying, mud up to your calves and blood speckled across your face like freckles from hell. Nothing makes sense. The field is noise and nonsense and sweat and song, and still, somehow, you're here. It's not a truce. That would imply someone said something official, and everyone else nodded and lowered their weapons. This is more like the collective body of 2 exhausted armies hitting the same emotional wall at the exact same time and deciding, without discussion, that they need a minute. It starts when a horn blows in the distance. It's not the angry kind or the triumphant kind. It's long and weirdly apologetic, like someone sat on it. You all freeze, not in fear, not even in anticipation, but in something closer to social confusion. One man, halfway through a swing, lowers his sword mid-arc, then looks around as if asking, "Do we keep going?" No one answers. His opponent backs away carefully, like they've just realized this whole fight was based on a scheduling error. A flag falls in the middle distance. You're not sure whose flag. It's blue, or maybe green, or maybe brown now because it landed directly in a puddle that has seen terrible things. The cloth flutters down in slow motion, like it's been waiting all day for its moment of dramatic collapse, and lands with the kind of sad splash that makes grown men reevaluate their life choices. The effect is immediate. You don't know why it matters. You don't know what it's supposed to signify, but everyone takes it personally, as if it insulted their mother and ruined the stew in the same breath. One guy gasps, another curses in a dialect no one else speaks. A third man just sits down abruptly, like his knees received a divine command. You feel the tension in your shoulders slacken. The sword in your hand dips. Your fingers ache, and you hadn't noticed until now how tightly you were gripping it. Across the field, You catch the eye of a man with blood on his face. Not all his, probably, and he just shrugs at you like this whole day's been a group project gone horribly wrong. Somewhere, someone sits on a helmet and lights a pipe. A knight, or what's left of one, sloshes his way toward a tree and leans on it like he's trying to blend in. You hear the distant twang of a lute again. The same guy. He's still going. Maybe he's the real commander. No one seems to know what's supposed to happen next. A few people try half-hearted charges, but stop when they realize no one is charging with them. It's hard to look heroic when you're running alone and your foot gets stuck in a rabbit hole. One man yells, "Back to the line!" But his voice cracks halfway through, and he gets distracted when someone tosses him an apple. You look around and notice how absurd it all is. Mud-caked boots, battered shields. One man is wearing 2 left gauntlets and seems fine with it. A woman from your side is helping an enemy soldier stand, dusting him off like this is a shared fever dream, and she's just being polite. You sit. You're not the first. You won't be the last. The ground is cold and squishy and vaguely suspicious, but it holds you. You lean on your sword like a cane, not a weapon. It feels heavier than before, and somehow less necessary. For a moment, the battlefield feels like a very badly planned festival after the band has packed up and the food stalls have run out. Everyone's just milling about, unsure whether to leave or hope something better happens. A crow lands on the fallen flag. It hops twice, caws once, then poops on it. That feels like closure. You exhale through your nose, not quite a laugh, but something cousin to it. The man nearest to you groans and lies flat on his back, armor clinking softly, like a wind chime made of hangovers. The fighting will probably resume soon. Some horn will sound again, someone important will shout, and the absurd machinery of war will crank back into motion. But for now, everyone pretends they're not enemies. Just tired people, in bad clothes, covered in the same mud. The arrows come in lazy at first, like they don't really want to be here either. You hear the faint thwip, then the hiss of air splitting just above your ear, and the very undignified noise you make in response. It's somewhere between a yelp and a curse and a prayer. No one blames you. Everyone's doing it. The archers are somewhere up the hill, silhouettes against a sky that clearly didn't sign up for this nonsense. You can't see their faces, but you can feel their mood. It's spiteful, personal, like they didn't get breakfast and decided the solution was flinging anger in wooden form down onto everyone indiscriminately. Friend, foe, that one guy trying to collect helmets like seashells, no one is safe. You try to move behind something solid, but the only available options are a barrel of suspicious stew and a man named Gil, who has been weeping into his own shirt since dawn. You choose the stew. It smells like despair and boiled something. You crouch and pretend it's cover. Arrows keep coming. A man runs past you with 2 shields, one in front and one on his back, muttering a chant that may or may not involve potatoes. Another soldier follows, swinging a sword wildly with his eyes closed, which seems brave until he knocks over a flag bearer and keeps running. You consider stopping him. You don't. One of your friends, you think it's Tomas, but he's wearing someone else's boots and no pants, so who's to say staggers toward you with a wild look and a broom. Not a weapon. An actual broom. He shouts something about destiny and starts swatting at the arrows like they're bees. You flatten yourself to the ground and let him have his moment. The archers laugh. You can't hear it exactly, but you feel it, somehow. That distant, smug snort carried on the wind. The sound of people who are far enough away to enjoy their job without consequence. You imagine them up there, snacking on something dry and smug, casually drawing back bows and chuckling every time someone below trips over a dislodged boot or screams at a shadow. You start fantasizing about becoming one of them. No mud in your socks. No broom-wielding friends. Just you, a bow, and the high ground. Another arrow thunks into the barrel beside you. Some of the stew escapes and hits your sleeve. You don't even flinch anymore. That part of your soul has shut its windows and gone to bed. A man tries to climb a tree to get a better view of the field. An arrow immediately pins his hat to the trunk, and he decides against it. A medic drags him off, muttering something about natural selection. You peek around the barrel just in time to see an arrow slice through a loaf of bread midair. It was being thrown by someone on your side, possibly as a peace offering or possibly because they just hate carbs. Either way, it explodes into crumbs, and the man who threw it falls to his knees like he's just watched a bakery die. You consider your options. 1. Run forward and hope the archers are as bad at close combat as they are good at ruining lunch. 2. Crawl backwards, pretend to faint, and let someone more enthusiastic take your place. 3. Throw the stew barrel at them and see what happens. The last one feels bold, stupid, and just stupid enough to work. Instead, you do none of these things. You stay where you are, stew-soaked and annoyed, and wait for the volley to end. They always end eventually. Usually because someone runs out of arrows or enthusiasm, or both. Another arrow lands nearby. You look up the hill and imagine their faces. Smug, probably. Covered in crumbs, maybe. You fantasize about joining them. Then remember, you have the upper body strength of a wet biscuit and return to reality. The man with the broom is now dueling a shrub. You decide not to ask. An arrow grazes the stew pot and ricochets into someone's helmet. The helmet was not attached to anyone. It rolls away with the arrow still lodged in it, like a tiny, angry sled. Everyone watches it go. No one moves. Somewhere behind you, someone shouts for a charge. No one listens. You stay low. You curse archers. And you dream, just for a moment, of a life where you're the one up on the hill, snacking and smirking and sending your sarcasm flying through the air at strangers. It's a good dream, until another arrow hits the stew. Then it's personal. Your boot is gone. It happens somewhere between a charge and a shuffle. In that long stretch of battlefield where the mud has ambitions, you feel at first a slow, sucking hesitation as your left foot sinks deeper than expected, followed by the unmistakable sensation of sudden betrayal as you lift your leg and realize half of you isn't coming. You stare down. The mud stares back, smug and bubbling. Your boot is gone, claimed, swallowed whole, possibly devoured. There's no ceremony, just a soft plop and the quiet resignation of a soldier who knows better than to try and retrieve it. You tug once, in vain. It doesn't budge. A small, bloated bubble escapes where your heel used to be. That feels like a farewell. So now you're half armored, half barefoot, and all fed up. You tell yourself it's fine. Roman soldiers probably fought barefoot. Monks walk on gravel. You are simply connecting to a more spiritual form of suffering. But then you step, and your sock, if it can still be called, that lands on something that squishes. You stop moving. There is a hierarchy of horrors in war. Blood, screaming, losing your helmet in front of someone attractive. And somewhere near the top, stepping barefoot into an unknown squish with exactly zero information about its origin. It could be fruit. It could be organ. It could be the last jelly ration in existence. You will never know. All you know is that your toes are wet, and they weren't supposed to be. You freeze like the ground has suddenly become emotional terrain. Your brain, too tired to scream, just loops one long vowel internally. Around you, people are still charging, or pretending to charge, or tripping over the scenery. But you're having a moment, a deeply personal, sock-soaking, spiritually destabilizing moment. A man sprints past you with a war cry that ends in a yelp as he too loses a boot and careens face first into a bush that had no part in. He emerges moments later with leaves in his teeth and a dazed expression, declaring allegiance to no side and holding a small toad like it's a weapon. You make eye contact. He nods solemnly. The toad blinks. You move again. The squish is still there. It follows you now, like a bad decision. Every step is a gamble between firmish ground and what you now assume is the world's worst stew. Someone shouts, "Hold the line," but the line is clearly fleeing in several directions. You think about yelling back, "Hold the footwear," but no one would laugh, and the mud would hear you. Ahead, a man tries to throw a spear but slips mid-throw and instead flings himself into the arms of an enemy soldier who catches him with the awkward grace of someone who's never been hugged and doesn't know if they like it. You step over them gingerly, dragging your good foot and hoping the sock doesn't peel off in protest. The mud gurgles again. It knows. There's a sharp squelch as someone behind you goes ankle deep and starts cursing in increasingly creative ways. One phrase involves goats. Another might be poetry. You offer no help. You've been there. It's every soldier for themselves now, and the mud is the real enemy. You glance back once more, toward where your boot vanished. A part of you expects it to rise, Excalibur-like, perhaps gripped by a hand of earth to remind you that footwear is fleeting, but legend is forever. Instead, there's just a gentle bloop, and then silence. You sigh. Adjust your stance. Accept that your left foot is now swamp property. There will be songs about this battle. Probably. None of them will mention you. Certainly not your boot. But maybe, just maybe, someone will remember the barefoot soldier who marched through muck and mystery, who survived unknown squish, and who did it all with one sock and a questionable level of dignity. Maybe. But for now, you step forward, slowly, carefully, moistly. Someone yells, "Flank," like it's a word that still means something. You're not sure who it was, maybe your commander. Maybe that guy who's been hallucinating since breakfast, but it comes with a kind of urgency that makes your legs move before your brain agrees. You veer left, or what you think is left. Directions are a social construct now, like personal space or mercy. There's a moment where everyone seems to lurch in different directions at once, like a badly rehearsed dance troupe performing an ankle-deep soup. The mud doesn't care. It pulls at knees and dreams with the same enthusiasm. The man next to you spins in a full circle and then runs into a bush. You hope it's deliberate. Someone else yells, "To the right," but they say it with the confidence of a man pointing at a cloud and calling it his uncle. You turn a little, then more, until you're facing somewhere between the enemy and a confused goat who is watching this whole ordeal with the calm judgment of someone who has seen better tactics from toddlers. The thing is, no one actually knows what a flank is. You've heard it in stories, epic tales of clever positioning, decisive maneuvers, generals stroking beards and nodding sagely. But out here, it's just a suggestion screamed during panic. A magical word tossed out when things stop making sense. Like retreat, but with more syllables and denial. You press forward toward what might be a flank, unless it's just another clump of trees or a particularly angry patch of air. Around you, soldiers are making choices, some bold, some deeply questionable. One man seems to believe the flank is straight up and is now climbing a rock with a butter knife between his teeth and no visible plan. Another is crawling on all fours, muttering, "I am the flank," like it's a mantra. You respect the commitment. The enemy, if they still exist as a coherent group, appear equally bewildered. One of them points at your side, possibly in recognition, possibly in accusation, and then drops their weapon to chase a helmet that's rolling downhill. Two others are locked in what might be combat or a very aggressive embrace. You avoid eye contact. You arrive at a spot that feels flank adjacent and pause to catch your breath, which tastes like damp leather and something faintly floral. You look around for leadership, or at least someone taller than you who seems less lost. No luck. Just faces you sort of recognize, all with that same glazed expression of, am I flanking or being flanked? Or did I just walk in a circle again? A horn sounds behind you. No one reacts. You watch as a flag bearer slowly plants his banner into a suspiciously soft pile of mud, then immediately falls over. The flag remains upright, majestic and alone, like a monument to miscommunication. Someone cheers. Someone else throws a cabbage. The enemy lines, if they can still be called lines, shift uncertainly. There's movement on the far side, but it looks more like someone tripping than any kind of organized maneuver. You wonder if they also got yelled at to flank and are now experiencing the same geographical identity crisis. Suddenly, a cluster of soldiers near you all surge in the same direction, possibly by accident, possibly through shared instinct. You join in, feet pounding over churned earth, heart thudding with the vague hope that this, finally, is what flanking feels like. You crash into a line of shrubs. The shrubs do not surrender. One of them fights back. You lose your balance, topple sideways, and end up face to face with a man from the other side who looks equally surprised to find himself here. He holds up a stick. You raise a spoon. You both freeze. A silent agreement passes between you. This is stupid. You back away slowly, nodding. He does the same. The moment is sacred. Somewhere else, someone yells, "Regroup," and the cycle begins anew. You never find the flank, but you do find a surprising number of potatoes, a man trying to trade his sword for a blanket, and the deep, unshakable sense that you're all just inventing the rules as you go, which, in a way, feels like the most honest part of the battle. He arrives like a myth no one ordered. The ground trembles, birds scatter, and sunlight, suspiciously theatrical sunlight, pours through a break in the clouds, like even the weather's on board with this entrance. A knight, full plate armor, silver so polished it hurts to look at, and a plume on his helmet that suggests either nobility or extreme overcompensation. You don't even know where he came from. 1 minute it's chaos, the usual swirl of men screaming and ducks waddling through carnage like it's a market square, and the next, he's just there, riding through the haze like destiny. Forgot to RSVP but showed up anyway, late and dramatic. The battlefield halts. Not entirely, but enough. Enough for heads to turn. Enough for swords to lower, arrows to pause mid-flight, conversations to stumble and die like they've just seen a ghost of chivalry past. A man near you gasps audibly. Someone whispers, "A real knight," like it means something in this war where spoons have been used as weapons and half the army doesn't own pants. The horse is enormous. Possibly 3 horses stacked under a decorative tarp. Its hooves kick up mud in elegant arcs, defying logic and physics. The knight holds a lance as long as a fishing boat and twice as impractical. His armor gleams with absurd optimism. You can see your own dumbfounded reflection in his chestplate. For a second, you believe. Not in victory, exactly, but in the possibility that someone, somewhere, still thinks any of this has a script. Then the horse hits a turn, a sharp one, too sharp, and the knight goes airborne. Not gracefully, not like in stories. He doesn't somersault or land with a sword raised high. He doesn't even scream. He just launches off the saddle like a sack of enchanted bricks and disappears behind a bush, with a sound that's half clang, half wet apology. The awe evaporates. Everyone blinks. Someone snorts. The silence hangs there, awkward and thick, like a sermon after someone's stomach growls. Then, slowly, the war resumes. A few arrows fly again. A man coughs. Someone shouts something about potatoes. You wander closer, curiosity outweighing caution. The knight is still behind the bush, helmet slightly askew, limbs stiff like he's trying to pretend this is a tactical position. You think he might be crying, or possibly praying, or simply recalibrating his life. He waves you off without words, a small, gauntleted motion of dignity's final defense. 2 archers walk by and pretend not to see him. One hums a tune. You leave him there, unsure whether to respect the performance or pity it. Maybe both. Maybe that's what knighthood is now, a kind of tragic theater where the armor is real but the purpose wandered off centuries ago. The battle pulls you back. The clangs, the grunts, the smell of overcooked onions and existential dread. You pick up a shield that used to be a cooking pan. You rejoin the line, or what remains of it, and swing at a man who looks equally confused to be here. Somewhere behind you, the night groans. Not in pain, just loudly, like a man whose entire myth collapsed under its own metaphor. You keep moving. The field has no patience for symbols. You weren't planning on heroism. You were planning on lunch, or something adjacent to it specifically, a small bread roll launched from a catapult-turned-snack dispenser after someone misunderstood a supply order. It arced through the sky like divine intervention with a crust, landed somewhere beyond a hedgerow, and you, driven by hunger and poor judgment, followed. It felt simple at first. Just a quick detour. Find the roll, retrieve it, return to your particular patch of yelling and sword-related misunderstandings. But hedgerows are deceptive. They whisper false promises of linear direction, and then conspire with terrain to send you gently, unceremoniously, into entirely the wrong war. You only notice the mistake when the uniforms around you stop matching yours. Not immediately, of course. There's a weird grace period where everyone seems too tired to notice or care. One man nods at you like you've just returned from a long bathroom break. Another hands you a water skin and grunts something that might be blessings or beans, and neither of you clarify. For a brief, unsettling moment, it feels like you've been adopted. Then someone asks what squad you're with. You answer with a sound that isn't a word, more of a hopeful exhale. Their eyes narrow. Suspicion blooms like a rash. You pivot dramatically, pretending to scan the horizon like someone deeply invested in tactics. Maybe they'll think you're a scout, or a prophet, or extremely lost. You nod a few times, say, yes, the ridge, and then start walking with purpose in a direction you're fairly certain is not back toward anything. It becomes clear, with each step, that no one here knows what's going on either. A man is sharpening a stick that is already on fire. A pair of archers are arguing about whether clouds count as omens. One soldier is writing in a journal while sobbing. You feel oddly at home. Then someone drops a helmet and, by the strange logic of battlefield cause and effect, 5 nearby troops take it as a signal to reposition. They fan out like this is rehearsed, and you're stuck in the middle, clutching a slightly stale bread roll and trying not to scream. You attempt an exit. It fails. Your path is blocked by a horse, a mean one. It doesn't rear dramatically, just stares at you with the weary loathing of a beast that's seen too many speeches and not enough oats. You sidestep. It sidesteps. This continues for longer than anyone finds comfortable. Eventually, you duck under its neck and bolt toward what you hope is neutral mud. Someone shouts behind you, maybe, "Stop," maybe, "Lunch thief," maybe your actual name. Doesn't matter. You are now officially fleeing. You dive behind a log that is somehow both too small to hide you and too big to jump over. From here, you try to make sense of your surroundings. You spot your side's flag in the distance, flapping lazily, like it too has lost motivation. Between you and that symbol of possible salvation is a wide stretch of field occupied by people who are mostly yelling at the wrong people and stabbing trees by accident. You could go around. You could wait until nightfall. You could live here now. A nearby soldier tosses you a pickle and says, "For luck." You nod solemnly, as if this is a known ritual. The pickle is soft. You are softer. You breathe, grip your bread, and start crawling. Behind you, someone calls out, "Who was that?" But no one answers. You're already halfway to an identity crisis, disguised as determination, covered in mud, and blessed by a pickle. You don't know who won this part of the battle. You don't know what the objective was. All you know is you went looking for food and found confusion, camaraderie, and a very territorial horse. War is strange like that. There is a moment small and strange when the chaos parts just enough to reveal clarity. You're face to face with a man whose armor looks borrowed and whose sword is being held like it might still be under warranty. His helmet sits slightly crooked, and he has the expression of someone who's just remembered they left bread in the oven 3 miles away. The field fades. The yelling, the mud, the minor explosion behind you that might have been a cow giving up, it all blurs into something distant. It's just you and him now. A mutual pause, a shared breath. 2 people, inexplicably, undeniably committed to the performance of formality in a world that's done pretending. He lifts his blade in a salute, just like the stories say. You mirror the motion. Yours a little slower, partly from awe, partly from a cramp that's been threatening mutiny since noon. You both nod. This is it, the honorable duel, a noble clash amid the nonsense, the kind of thing bards lie about for coin. Then he sneezes, violently. His helmet shifts with the force of it, clanging down over his eyes. The sword drops. He stumbles back with a noise that sounds like, "Oh no," muffled through metal. You blink. He holds up a hand. You hold up a hand. A silent agreement forms between you. This was never going to go well. He fumbles for his sword, but knocks it farther away with his foot. You, out of some bizarre instinct, offer to get it for him. You both reach at the same time and bonk heads. He apologizes. You apologize. Somewhere in the distance, someone yells, "What is this?" You don't answer. Instead, you sit. Just drop down into the mud with the kind of slow, joint-creaking descent that signals defeat or enlightenment. He joins you a second later, landing with a squelch that echoes like judgment. You sit in silence, side by side, staring out at the mess of the battle. Someone's running in a circle. Someone else is trying to trade a helmet for soup. Arrows fly overhead, none particularly aimed, all carrying the energy of desperate suggestions. Your almost opponent pulls off his helmet. His hair is damp and sad. He looks about your age, though his eyes are the eyes of someone who has been shouted at by every authority figure possible and still doesn't know why. "First duel?" he asks. You nod. He sniffs. "Mine too." You both stare ahead again. A man sprints past with a fish in each hand, screaming about prophecy. You don't flinch. After a while, he offers you something wrapped in cloth. It's a piece of cheese. You accept it like it's sacred. It tastes vaguely of onion and victory. The 2 of you talk, briefly, not about the war, not about sides, just about things like the weather and how armor always smells, like regret and mildew, and whether or not bread can be considered a currency if you believe in it hard enough. Eventually, you both rise. He picks up his sword again, holding it like a broom. You dust off your tunic in a way that accomplishes nothing. "We'll call it a draw," he says. You nod again. He jogs off in a direction that might be strategic or might be random panic. You watch him go until he trips over a root and continues running without addressing it. You turn back toward whatever counts as your side. There's a man yelling at a horse, and the horse is yelling back. You sigh, pick up your shield, and rejoin the pageant of mayhem. And in your pocket, you keep the cheese. A souvenir of diplomacy. You limp your way across what used to be a battlefield and is now just a festival of groans and questionable decisions. Mud squelches under each step, clinging to you like it's trying to keep you here. The arrow in your leg is less painful than it is annoying, like a very sharp, very rude roommate. You clutch your side dramatically, not because it helps, but because it makes you feel slightly more dignified as you collapse near the medic tent, which is really just a blanket on 2 sticks and a goat that seems to have opinions. Paul is there. You know it's Paul because his name is stitched into his tunic, unevenly, like someone did it mid-concussion. He's not a doctor. You're not sure he's even literate, but he has a stick, a satchel, and the quiet confidence of a man who has absolutely no idea what he's doing, but also no one's told him to stop. He looks at you the way a man might look at a suspicious turnip. He says. It's not an encouraging sound. It's the sound people make when they find something growing on bread. You try to explain that it's just a clean arrow through the leg. No frills, no curses, nothing glowing. But Paul has already begun rummaging through his bag with the intensity of someone avoiding eye contact with consequences. You glance down at your leg. The arrow's not deep. Probably didn't hit anything vital unless you count morale. Still, you'd prefer not to remove it yourself. That didn't go well last time. Or the time before that. You remember because you still can't feel part of your toe. Paul finally pulls something out, a wooden spoon. He holds it up triumphantly, as if revealing a relic. You ask, as calmly as possible, what the spoon is for. He tells you it's for biting. You ask if that's before or after the treatment. He doesn't answer, just pats your shoulder with the vague sympathy of a man who's seen too much and understood none of it. He then selects a bandage. It's made of something that may have once been a curtain, now stained with mystery and ambition. He doesn't remove the arrow, just wraps the bandage around it with the dedication of a child making a present no one asked for. It's tight, possibly too tight. Your foot starts to hum. Should I be feeling colors? You ask. Paul nods like this is a promising sign. The goat bleats. Paul finally leans back and surveys his work like an artist who's pretty sure he painted the right house. You are now bandaged, barely able to bend your leg, and inexplicably holding the spoon. You ask if you can walk. Paul shrugs. You ask if you should rest. Paul shrugs. You ask if Paul is, in fact, a medic. I was a baker, he says. Wiping his hands on his pants like that clears up the whole situation. A man stumbles into the tent clutching his head and asking if it's supposed to be whistling. Paul tosses him a turnip and gestures for him to wait his turn. You're not sure if the turnip is part of the treatment or just Paul's lunch. Eventually, you stand. Your leg protests but doesn't collapse. That feels like a win. Paul gives you a thumbs up, then turns back to the goat and starts discussing supply logistics with it. The goat seems skeptical. You hobble out of the tent, slightly more wrapped, slightly less certain of your survival. Behind you, someone screams, and someone else yells, "Medic," and you hear Paul say, again, followed by what sounds suspiciously like, "Do we still have the fork?" You keep moving. Better to die in the mud than be cured by Paul twice. The trumpet sounds like glory, or at least it tries to. It's a little off-key and a little too enthusiastic, like someone trying to recite epic poetry while falling down stairs. But still, a trumpet means something, and you are trained, strongly suggested, really, to react to it with urgency. Except this time, no one runs, no one shouts, no one prepares to die with honor or dismay or indigestion. Instead, someone yells, "Soup's on!" and the field erupts into applause. It's the dinner trumpet. It shouldn't be. The real retreat trumpet was lost somewhere between the third skirmish and the inexplicable cow incident, and no one had the heart to find it after the cow won. So someone, likely Greg, who believes in initiative but not consequences, grabbed the closest brass object and gave it a blow. That object happened to be the dinner trumpet. And now, half the army believes they are owed turnips. You stand ankle-deep in mud, shield stained with something that was either a man or an overcooked beet, and watch as a line of soldiers breaks formation like children called in from recess. A cheer rises. A man weeps openly. Someone kisses the ground. Someone else kisses the trumpet. You think about reminding them there is no soup. You don't. Instead, you sit on a rock that smells like defeat and feet and try to process what just happened. Across the field, the enemy is also pausing. You make awkward eye contact with a man who might have tried to stab you earlier. He shrugs. You shrug. Mutual confusion is perhaps the only real diplomacy left. The cheering continues. A cauldron is dragged from somewhere. It's unclear where it came from, as no. One recalls packing one and placed with reverence upon a campfire that did not exist 10 minutes ago. Already, someone is stirring it with a stick that looks suspiciously like a javelin. The contents bubble ominously. You catch the scent of wet cabbage and dreams deferred. Your commander appears, breathless and ready to command. He sees the line has broken. The soldiers are singing something that includes the word gravy 17 times, and his face does something tragic and heroic all at once. He opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again, then sighs and sits beside you. "We were winning," he says. "Were we?" you ask, mostly out of politeness. He doesn't answer. Instead, he stares at the sky like maybe God will explain something. A bird flies overhead and is immediately hit by a thrown potato. The bird survives. The potato does not. Morale, strangely, is high, perhaps dangerously so. The trumpet blows again, a second time, longer, almost noble this time. You'd like to believe it's signaling a return to order, to purpose, to battle. But then someone brings out a loaf of bread shaped like a unicorn and begins a toast to the fallen culinary arts. You eat something that might be lentils. You don't ask. You no longer question the nature of food or war, or whether the man beside you is technically dead or just very sleepy. You are full, for the first time in days. This is enough. Then the enemy claps. Not all of them, just a few. A slow, rhythmic, sarcastic applause that travels across the battlefield like a contagious rash. Your side responds. More cheering. Someone bows. Someone else begins trading soup for arrows, as if this was always the plan. War, as it turns out, is just improv with louder props. The dinner trumpet has saved lives today. Accidentally, probably. You lean back, sip something from a ladle that tastes like betrayal and basil, and decide that if you die here, it will at least be on a full stomach and under a sky confused. By all of you. You are muddy. You are bloody. And somewhere in your mouth, there is now a gap that wasn't there this morning. A tooth gone rogue, possibly launched during a poorly aimed battle cry, or maybe when someone mistook your face for a drum. You're not sure. Memory has become a luxury item. What you are sure of is this. You're still here. Somehow. You're sitting in the aftermath, which looks a lot like the during, just quieter. The smoke has calmed to a lazy coil. The shouting has become mumbling, and the smell, still mostly iron, sweat, and boiled despair, has a faint note of victory. Or maybe that's just singed onion. Hard to tell. There is a tree in front of you. It bears the distinct mark of your blade. Several marks, actually, in a chaotic cluster suggesting either combat or an interpretive dance. You remember charging something tall and unmoving. You remember yelling. You don't remember that it had leaves. In retrospect, you owe that tree an apology. A crow lands nearby and eyes you like it's sizing up a snack. You throw a pebble at it with all the strength of a damp towel. The crow does not flinch. It just tilts its head and decides you are, at best, mildly amusing, at worst, irrelevant. A familiar voice approaches behind you, uneven and limping. It's Harwin, the only man alive who can turn a limp into a full-body performance. He drops beside you, breathless, grinning, and missing an eyebrow. "You lived," he says, sounding almost disappointed. "You didn't," you reply, pointing at his face. He touches the bald patch where an expression used to be. "Fashionable," he decides. "It'll come back in style." Around you, soldiers shuffle, limp, groan, and carry each other with varying degrees of competence and consent. The camp is being reassembled, one crooked tent and burnt pot at a time. Somewhere, someone is playing a flute out of tune and possibly out of spite. You suspect it's Gregory. He only knows 3 notes and plays them like a threat. You stand slowly. Your knees crack in protest. Your back joins in. Your shoulder has something lodged in it that you thought was a feather, but turns out to be a splinter from a catapult. You decide to leave it there. It feels earned. A man walks by covered in someone else's blood and proudly carrying a loaf of bread. You don't ask questions. That's how wars become history, people choosing not to ask what the bread means. You think about the morning, about the boots you lost in the mud, the speech that made your stomach churn, the squirrel that started it all. You think about the chaos, the horns, the arrows, the chicken, and the man who spun like a top for a full 3 minutes before collapsing. You think about Paul, who you're fairly sure is still using herbs meant for soup. You think about the silence now. It's the kind that presses against your ears like a hand. You'd forgotten what quiet sounded like. Someone shouts that victory was achieved. Someone else shouts that the soup is gone. The second announcement gets more of a reaction. You look down at your hands. They're dirty, scratched, trembling slightly. You clench them and unclench them. Still yours, still working, still absurdly attached to a body that has no business being upright. You smile, just a little. You don't know who won, maybe no one. Maybe that's not how this works. Maybe you survive, and that's the win. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it always has been. You take a deep breath, and it tastes like smoke, sweat, and stale bread. But it's still a breath, and it's yours. Groaning becomes the dominant language. It stretches across the camp like a hymn, low and persistent, sung by men who've learned the precise pitch of pain that isn't fatal but also isn't going away. You add your voice, softly, like a backup singer in the world's least successful band. Someone sings, it's not clear who or why. The tune is old, maybe a lullaby or maybe a dirge, depending on how long you've been bleeding. The lyrics involve a goose, a barrel, and something untranslatable that might be a metaphor or might just be a mistake. It doesn't matter. No one stops them. Maybe it's helping. Maybe it's keeping the wolves away. You lie on a shield, which is technically flat but emotionally jagged. It belonged to someone named Auric, who either survived and doesn't care or didn't and doesn't need it. You tell yourself you're honoring his memory. You don't mention the part where the ground was cold and the shield was dry. That's between you and the gods. Bread is passed around like treasure, hoarded and broken with reverence. It's hard, suspiciously heavy, and older than the war, possibly older than wheat itself. You chew with commitment and the vague hope it contains calories. It does not taste like victory, but it tastes like something, and that's enough. Next to you, someone has made a pillow out of chainmail. He looks peaceful in the way that only the deeply concussed can. Another man is talking to a helmet. The helmet is not responding, which somehow makes the conversation more sincere. A third is trying to count his toes and seems pleased to discover he still has most of them. In the corner of the firelight, a group of veterans play dice with fingers instead of coins. You don't ask where the extra fingers came from. The laughter is real, though, ragged and sharp, like it's cutting its way out of their throats, but real all the same. Your stomach grumbles a declaration of civil unrest. The bread did nothing. You dream of cheese. Not the kind you've eaten, but the idea of cheese. Cheese as a concept, smooth, golden, utterly implausible. You imagine wheels of it rolling through soft fields while you chase them barefoot, unarmed, unburdened. The dream makes you drool into the rim of Auric's shield. Someone throws a log onto the fire. Sparks leap like startled insects, and a few land on a man's leg. He watches them smolder without moving. You respect his commitment to stillness. A conversation drifts over from the other side of camp. It seems to involve a pig, a bet, and someone named Marjorie, who is definitely not here. You wonder who Marjorie is. You wonder if she exists. You wonder if you'd marry her for a soft bed and uninterrupted sleep. The stars are visible, scattered and bright, like someone spilled diamonds across a dark sheet. You try to find constellations, but all you see are swords, arrows, and one cluster that looks suspiciously like the commander's nose. You laugh once, then wince. Laughing hurts. A hand touches your shoulder. It belongs to someone with a blanket and a 1,000-yard stare. They say nothing. Just sit. You don't ask their name. You don't need to. Everyone's the same in the dark. Eventually, the groaning fades to snoring. Not silence, never silence, but something close enough to pretend. You shift on the shield, find a position that doesn't make your spine cry, and let your eyes close. You fall asleep wondering if the cheese dream will return. You hope it does. Tomorrow, they say, you advance, not march, Not ride, not even walk. Advance. The word tastes suspiciously like optimism, which is dangerous this deep into things. You nod when they say it, like it makes sense, like you're ready, like your legs haven't stiffened into two wooden beams barely tethered to the idea of a body, like your shoulder isn't still humming from when you mistook a rock for a man and tackled it honorably into a puddle. No one asks where you're going. It's not that you don't care. It's that caring takes more energy than anyone has left. There are theories, whispered between bites of stolen bread, that the advance is really just a long, scenic loop that ends in another equally miserable patch of mud. Others suspect there is no destination, that movement itself is the illusion of progress, a tactic to keep morale ahead of mutiny by a half step. You sit near the fire, which is mostly smoke now. It clings to your clothes, your hair, the inside of your lungs, until even your thoughts smell burned. Across from you, a man hiccups so violently he drops his spoon. No one offers to pick it up. He stares at the ground, defeated, until he decides soup can, in fact, be drunk directly from the bowl. You admire the innovation. The night is cold in the way that doesn't feel seasonal so much as personal, like the wind knows your name and has some grudge. It's working out slowly, one icy draft at a time. You curl tighter under a blanket that used to belong to someone braver, or at least someone warmer. You suspect they're dead, or rich, or both. You hope to one day be either. The commander passes by with the stiff gait of a man trying to project destiny while clearly limping. His armor is polished again. You don't know how. There's no soap, no water, and no time. There is only the faint smell of boiled onions and defeat, and yet his chest plate gleams like the heavens care who wins this. He says something inspirational, probably. His voice gets swallowed by the hiccups and a well-timed snore from someone too unconscious to be inspired. The speech ends. A few men clap. One starts clapping late and continues well after the others have stopped. It's unclear if he misunderstood the moment or if he just enjoys the sound. Either way, he looks proud. You stare into the coals, trying to divine your future in their shifting reds. One spark spirals upward and vanishes into the dark. You decide that's you, a brief light, ascending dramatically, then gone. It's poetic. You tell yourself to write it down if you live. You won't. A man starts humming, low and off-key. Others join in, not because it sounds good, but because silence feels like surrender. The song has no lyrics, or if it did, they were forgotten 4 campaigns ago and replaced by grunts, coughs, and what may be someone chewing, someone nearby. Whispers about home, not to you, just to the fire. You catch pieces, a daughter, a dog, a field that didn't yell back when you stepped on it. It makes your chest ache in a way you're too tired to name. You stare harder at the coals, willing them to erase the ache with heat. They don't. They just crackle in sympathy. Eventually, the night settles into something resembling sleep. There's still hiccuping, somewhere, but it fades in and out, like a dying star. You pull the blanket tighter and try not to think about tomorrow. But it's coming, with boots and banners and someone yelling, "Advance," like it means something. You will nod again. You will rise, because that's what you do, even when no one knows where. They call it a triumph. The bards are already humming about banners and glory and how the sun broke through the clouds exactly as the enemy fell. You don't remember any sun. You remember mud, endless, personal mud, the kind that reaches into your soul and gently informs you that you'll never be clean again. You remember someone screaming, "Victory," into a puddle, and then immediately throwing up into it. There was also a goat. You don't know whose. It didn't wear colors, didn't swear allegiance. It simply wandered through the chaos like it had an appointment, then disappeared. The victory parade is more of a limp. Flags wave, but mostly because the wind has no respect for ceremony. People cheer. Some of them even mean it. You walk past them covered in what you hope is just dirt. But statistically speaking, some of it is probably man. A boy hands you a flower. It wilts on contact. That feels symbolic. You're told there was strategy, that someone flanked at the right moment, or maybe the left, and that sealed it. You recall flailing, possibly yelling. There was a knight at some point who dismounted with all the grace of a collapsing wardrobe, then sat on the ground and wept into his helmet for 15 full minutes. He claimed later it was a war cry. You let him have that. Everyone deserves one small delusion. Now they speak of the battle with wide eyes and louder voices, as though if they shout enough, it'll become something worth remembering. You nod along. They want heroes, not witnesses. You can play along. You're excellent at nodding now. It's most of what you do. There's food again. Real food, allegedly. Someone passes you a hunk of bread so dense it qualifies as a weapon. You gnaw it anyway. A man beside you swears it's the same recipe they used back in the Great War of somewhere important. He says this with the authority of a man who once met a general's cousin's goat. Later, they bring out a bard who rhymes valor with tavern and steel with meal. The crowd loves it. You try to smile, but your face forgot how sometime between the third skirmish and the moment you fell asleep inside your own helmet, you focus on the fire instead. It crackles like it knows better. They give medals. Not to you. Your name is hard to pronounce, and no one wants to admit they lost the parchment it was written on. A man with an impressive mustache gets 3 medals and a handshake from the commander. You remember that man, hiding behind a cart, screaming about bees. There were no bees. Someone toasts the fallen. You raise your cup solemnly. It leaks. You drink from it anyway. You think of the friend who tried to duel a tree, the one who swore the bark had insulted his honor. You think of the archer who aimed straight up for dramatic effect and took out a drummer. You think of the drummer. No one's replaced him yet. People just slap their legs now and hope for rhythm. Eventually, the celebration fades. The fires dim. The stories become murmurs. You sit on a log that might be a bench, or might be a sleeping man. Either way, it doesn't protest. The stars are out, doing their usual twinkle routine, oblivious to your aches, your cracks, the quiet throb in your ribs where a shield used to be. You survived. You won, apparently. That's what they say. But you remember the mud. You remember the goat.